Welcome to Howard Brown Barber and Beauty Institute. Today we are doing the review for hair cutting. Let's begin. The reference point that signals a change in head shape from flat to round or vice versa is the crown area, occipital corner, four corners, parietal ridge. If you chose C, four corners, you are correct. The straight lines used to build weight and create one length and low elevation haircuts are parallel lines, horizontal lines, weight lines, diagonal lines. If you chose B, horizontal lines, you are correct. The straight lines used to remove weight to create graduated or layered haircuts are cutting lines, diagonal lines, vertical lines, horizontal lines. If you chose C, vertical lines, you are correct. For controls during haircutting, the hair is parted into working areas called foundations, lines, parts, sections. If you chose D, sections, you are correct. The angle at which fingers are held when cutting the line that creates the end shape is the elevation, guide line, cutting line, perimeter line. If you chose C, cutting line, you are correct. Which guideline is used when creating layers or a graduated haircut? Traveling guideline, outer guideline, stationary guideline, shape guideline. If you chose A, traveling guideline, you are correct. The technique of combing the hair away from its natural falling position rather than straight out from the head is called subsectioning, over-direction, traveling guidelines, undercutting. If you chose B, over-direction, you are correct. For a client with a long face, the stylist would recommend a style that adds, is it volume and height on top, fullness on the sides, weight to the chin and front, fullness in length. If you chose B, fullness on the sides, you are correct. A stylist will need to use less elevation on curly hair than on straighter texture, or leave the hair a bit longer because of elasticity, growth, porosity, shrinkage. If you chose D, shrinkage, you are correct. The direction in which the hair grows from the scalp, also referred to as natural fall or natural falling position, is the outermost perimeter, fringe area, parallel section, growth pattern. If you chose D, growth pattern, you are correct. Which type of comb is used for close tapers on the nape and sides when using the scissors over comb technique? Wide tooth comb, barber comb, tail comb, styling comb. If you chose B, barber comb, you are correct. The technique used to free up the cutting hand to cut a subsection is called moving the shears, removing the comb, transferring the comb, working the shears. If you chose C, transferring the comb, you are correct. The term used to describe the amount of pressure applied when combing and holding a subsection is tension, sectioning, elevation, angle. If you chose A, tension, you are correct. When cutting hair, a general rule of thumb is to stand or sit directly behind the area you are cutting, directly in front of the area you are cutting, to the right of the area you are cutting, to the left of the area you are cutting. If you chose B, directly in front of the area you are cutting, you are correct. When cutting a blank, it is customary to use a horizontal cutting line and cut below your fingers or on the sides or on the insides of your knuckles. Uniform or an increasing layered haircut, high-level layered effect or a bi-level cut, shorter layer haircut or a shag effect, blunt haircut or a heavier graduated haircut. If you chose D, blunt haircut or a heavier graduated haircut, you are correct. The visual line in a haircut where the ends of the hair hang together is the guideline, weight line, graduated line, stationary line. If you chose B, weight line, you are correct. Parting a haircut in the opposite way it was cut at the same elevation to check for precision of line and shape is called cross-checking, consistent tension, mirror elevation, blunt cutting. If you chose A, cross-checking, you are correct. If using the wide teeth of the comb while cutting the blunt haircut, always comb the section first with the fine teeth. Then change the position of the comb so it is at an angle. Switch the comb to the alternate hand and comb with the fine teeth. Turn the comb around and recomb with the wide teeth. Turn the comb on its side and comb again. If you chose C, turn the comb around and recomb with the wide teeth, you are correct. It is important to work with blank, where and how hair is moved over the head when locating the bang area, the head form, the natural distribution, the fringe, the weight line. If you chose B, the natural distribution, you are correct. A method of cutting or layering the hair in which the fingers and shears glide along the edge of the hair to remove length is angle cutting, razor cutting, blunt cutting, slide cutting. If you chose D, slide cutting, you are correct. The process of removing excess bulk without shortening hair length is known as blunt cutting, angle cutting, texturizing, compensating. If you chose C, texturizing, you are correct. The process of thinning the hair to graduated lengths using a sliding movement of the shears with the blades kept partially open is called slithering, notching, point cutting, angle cutting. If you chose A, slithering, you are correct. When performing the slicing technique to remove weight or on the surface of the haircut, it is best to work on, is it damp hair, soapy hair, wet hair, or dry hair? If you chose D, dry hair, you are correct. When using the clipper over comb technique, the amount of hair that is removed is determined by the apex of the head, angle of the comb, size of the section, type of clipper used. If you chose B, angle of the comb, you are correct. If the blade tension on your shears is too tight, it will cause the shears to bind and cause unnecessary wear and user fatigue, the adjustment knob to loosen, the hair to fold, debris to accumulate. If you chose A, user fatigue, you are correct. The ability to duplicate an existing haircut or create a new haircut from a photo will build a stronger professional relationship between the stylist and vendors, manager, clients, fellow stylists. If you chose C, clients, you are correct. Elevation creates graduation and layers, cutting lines, casts and crowns, shrinkage. If you chose A, graduation and layers, you are correct. A guideline located at the outer line of the cut is known as the parameter, interior, cutting line, perimeter. If you chose D, perimeter, you are correct. Shears should be sharpened after every service, only as needed, every 3 months, every 6 months. If you chose B, only as needed, you are correct. You should use blank tension on straight hair? Is it minimal, maximum, moderate, zero? If you chose B, maximum, you are correct. Using a razor on blank hair will weaken the cuticle and cause frizzing. Straight, fine, blonde, curly. If you chose D, curly, you are correct. A great haircut always begins with a great consultation, good shampoo, scalp massage, styling book. If you chose A, great consultation, you are correct. The client's hair should be blank before the consultation. Uncleansed and styled, uncleansed and unstyled, cleansed and styled, cleansed and unstyled. If you chose D, cleansed and unstyled, you are correct. A quick way to analyze a face shape is to determine if it is long or short, wide or narrow, wide or long, narrow or long. If you chose C, wide or long, you are correct. Hair texture is based on the blank of each hair strand. Length, thickness, color, circumference. If you chose B, thickness, you are correct. Hair density is the number of individual hair strands on blank of scalp. Is it 1/4 square inch, 1/3 square inch, half square inch, 1 square inch? If you chose D, 1 square inch, you are correct. Clippers are mainly used when creating long haircuts, must never be used without a guard, are mainly used to remove bulk from the hair, may be used with cutting guards of various lengths. If you chose D, may be used with cutting guards of various lengths, you are correct. Cast shears are usually blank than forged shears. Less expensive to purchase, more expensive to purchase, easier to bend back into shape, denser. If you chose A, less expensive to purchase, you are correct. The blank on a pair of shears allows you to have more control over the shears. Cutting edge, thumb hole, finger tang, pivot and the adjustment area. If you chose C, finger tang, you are correct. Your shears should be cleaned and lubricated after every client, at the end of the day, once a week, as needed. If you chose A, after every client, you are correct. Before purchasing a pair of shears, ensure that the company has a person who is certified to blank them in your area. Clean, lubricate, polish, sharpen. If you chose D, sharpen, you are correct. Knowing how to hold your tools properly will help you avoid muscle strain in your legs, shoulders, chest, arms. If you chose D, arms, you are correct. When palming the shears, hold the comb between your blank fingers. Thumb, index, and middle. Index, middle, and ring. Middle, ring, and pinky. Thumb, middle, and pinky. If you chose A, thumb, index, and middle, you are correct. To achieve constant, even results in a haircut, it is important to use blank tension. Minimum, moderate, maximum, consistent. If you chose D, consistent, you are correct. Heavier graduated haircuts work well on hair that tends to blank when dry. Is it contract, expand, become curlier, become shinier? If you chose B, expand, you are correct. Which of these statements about cutting hair with a razor is true? A shear cut gives a softer appearance than a razor cut. A razor gives a softer effect on the ends of the hair and shears. Shears have much finer blades than razors. When working with a razor, the line is blunt. If you chose B, a razor gives a softer effect on the ends of the hair and shears, you are correct. Texturizing cannot be done with cutting shears, thinning shears, a razor, clippers. If you chose D, clippers, you are correct. When using clippers, you should always work blank the natural growth patterns, especially in the nape. With, against, across, alternately with and against. If you chose B, against, you are correct. When trimming the male client's facial hair, it is recommended that you check blank and ask if he would like to remove any excess hair. His ears only. His eyebrows only. His ears and eyebrows. His chest. If you chose C, his ears and eyebrows, you are correct. The term blank refers to the shape of the head. Head form, skull form, head guide, guide line. If you chose A, head form, you are correct. Places on the head that mark where the surface of the head changes are known as four corners, angles, reference points, perimeters. If you chose C, reference points, you are correct. The widest area of the head is the occipital bone, parietal ridge, nape, apex. If you chose B, parietal ridge, you are correct. The bone that protrudes at the base of the skull is the parietal ridge, orbital bone, occipital bone, nape. If you chose C, occipital bone, you are correct. The highest point on the top of the head is the apex, peak, plateau, nape. If you chose A, apex, you are correct. The area at the back part of the neck is the bevel, cast, notch, nape. If you chose D, nape, you are correct. The triangular section that begins at the apex and ends at the front corners is the back area, bang area, bevel area, crown area. If you chose B, bang area, you are correct. A blank is a thin, continuous mark used as a guide. Line, head form, layer, part. If you chose A, line, you are correct. Line parallel from the floor and relative to the horizon are blank line. Vertical, horizontal, diagonal, straight. If you chose B, horizontal, you are correct. The space between two lines or surfaces that intersect at a given point is an angle, an apex, a bevel, an intersection. If you chose A, an angle, you are correct. Lines perpendicular to the horizon are blank lines. Horizontal, straight, diagonal, vertical. If you chose D, vertical, you are correct. Lines that have a slanting or sloping direction are straight, horizontal, vertical, diagonal. If you chose D, diagonal, you are correct. The line dividing the hair at the scalp is a part, bevel, section, graduation. If you chose A, part, you are correct. When creating uniform layers, the hair is elevated to blank degrees from the scalp and cut at the same length. 180, 90, 60, 45. If you chose B, 90, you are correct. What type of shear blade edge gives the smoothest cut and has the sharpest edge possible? A full concave edge, a partial concave edge, a full convex edge, a partial beveled edge. If you chose C, a full convex edge, you are correct. When purchasing shears, consider purchasing a shear that comes with a blank system, since you will be working with the shears almost constantly. Form-fitting, self-adjusting, self-beveling, finger-fitting. If you chose D, finger-fitting, you are correct. Which type of texture shears is the best for adding increased blending? Blending shear, texturizing shear, chunking shear, thinning shear. If you chose B, texturizing shear, you are correct. Blank is the key to avoiding long-term repetitive motion injuries and other musculoskeletal disorder. Prevention, relaxation, exercise, practice. If you chose A, prevention, you are correct. Which hand position is used most often when cutting uniform or increasing layers? Cutting below the fingers, cutting palm to palm, cutting over your fingers, cutting across the palm. If you chose C, cutting over your fingers, you are correct. Which haircut at a 90-degree elevation and then over-directed to maintain length and weight at the perimeter? The layered haircut, the long layered haircut, the blunt haircut, the bob haircut. If you chose B, the long layered haircut, you are correct. Always make consistent and blank partings, which will give an even amount of hair to each subsection and produce more precise results. Thin, short, thick, clean. If you chose D, clean, you are correct. When cutting a layered haircut on a client with hair past the shoulder blades, which technique is used to connect the top sections to the lengths? Texturizing, scissor over comb, slide cutting, clipper cutting. If you chose C, slide cutting, you are correct. Which cutting tool should generally be avoided when cutting curly hair? Razor, clipper, shear, texturizing shear. If you chose A, razor, you are correct. When using the scissor over comb technique, how is the haircut cross-checked? By working across the area horizontally. By working across the area vertically. By working across the area diagonally. By cutting across the wide teeth of the comb. If you chose C, by working across the area diagonally, you are correct. Which haircut represents cutting the hair very short and close to the hairline and then gradually getting longer as you move up the head? A blunt cut, a layer cut, a fade, a taper. If you chose D, a taper, you are correct. What is the process called when the hair contracts or lifts through the action of moisture loss drying? Is it reduction, shrinkage, contraction, parting? If you chose B, shrinkage, you are correct. This concludes this lesson. Make sure that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you would like more information about our school, please join our community at howardbrownonline.com. Howard Brown, where learning never stops.